Welcome to the Grace Hour Show, a Christian program that takes a dive into our daily challenges and helps us learn our faith in a practical way. I'm Paul Andrulonis, joined in the studio by Pastor Steve Andrulonis, also known as my father. And we're talking about the book of Ruth this week on the Grace Hour Show. And it's an interesting book. It's a book that we can learn a lot from. But before we get in there, how are you doing, Dad?
I'm doing good, I think.
You think?
This is we're pre-recording this show, so me and you will be doing pretty good right about
people
now
aren't
on
supposed
Tuesday.
To know. People aren't supposed to know that.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. All right, I'm sorry.
Did I mess that up? Or in summer, it's summertime.
Summertime is great.
Baltimore.
Yeah, hot in Baltimore. Get away to the beach. That's always a good thing.
All those things. Yeah.
Yeah. So
you're doing good. Good.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Yeah,
I'm doing all right as well.
That's good.
Been a minute since I've been on the Grace Hour, so
yeah.
Be patient with me.
I'll try.
But we're talking about Ruth, and specifically Ruth chapter 1 today on the Grace Hour Show. And this is a book that in my reading and studying a little bit, preparing for this, seeing the continuation from the book of Judges into the book of Ruth, I think you can't help but see that continuation. And maybe before you can kind of give us a little intro to what we'll talk about maybe, or start the conversation. But thinking about the first verse of Ruth chapter 1, it says, "It came to pass in the days when the judges ruled, that there was a famine in the land." And the last verse of the book of Judges, it says that in those days there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. And I just thought it was an interesting continuation to look at the previous book and then look at the first verse of this book. This is kind of the same time frame where there are judges in the land. People are doing what seems right to them. People are, maybe there's not the leadership or not the, there's no king at this point in Israel's history, but people are doing what's right in their own eyes. And now we see that there is a famine in the land. So that's just the thought that I had of doing what is right in your own eyes, and maybe there's some comparison to what we have in our world today, where people are doing what's right in their own eyes as it relates to life, choices, movement, and that's something I think will be part of our conversation. But what are you thinking about with the book of Ruth to start?
Yeah, well, that statement that you're talking about, there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. It appears a couple of times in the book of Judges. Someone has said, I can't remember, G. Campbell Morgan maybe, says that Ruth is a fresh spring in the mud puddle of the Judges. So chronologically, there's a famine mentioned in the book of Judges, and this story of Ruth, Naomi, Boaz happens during that period of time. So, the reason it's sort of positioned here in the scriptures, the Hebrew scriptures, is Israel is, having a torturous time. Judges is an amazingly complex and torturous book to read. It just seems like no one's getting anything right. We can't believe that the Spirit actually comes upon a guy like Samson. It's the mystery. It's the grace of God. Uses a guy like Jephthah, even in spite of his terrible vow, and allows him to go through with that vow. All kinds of things. And then I think it's setting up like the transition to a king on the throne, because we have Ruth, and then we go into 1st and 2nd Samuel. So we see that there's a torturous season. Ruth gives us this great story of a woman who falls in love with God, and then who is married into the line of Jesus, married into the line of the kings of Israel. And then in 1 Samuel, we see the height of maybe the climax of the disobedience of Israel, because we see Hophni and Phinehas, they take the ark gets captured by the Philistines. We also see the people, they listen to Samuel. Samuel's born to Hannah and Elkanah, and he becomes a prophet and a priest. And then we see that the people demand a king. So, if you were looking chronologically, and if you had a chronological Bible, you might, there are a couple of good ones out there, actually, chronological Bibles that you could read the stories through and see that this story sets up how Israel will get a king and how that king will eventually be David, but it won't be David first, you know? So, and so we know that Ruth is the Ruth at the very end of Ruth, and that's for another day this week.
Yeah.
In the very end of Ruth, we get the genealogy talking about, who Ruth belongs to, the father. So Ruth will be the great grandmother, it seems, not Ruth. Yeah, Ruth will be the great grandmother or the grandmother, I think great grandmother of Jesse, who will be, or the great grandmother of David. I'm not getting the chronology right there, the genealogy right. But so it's, it's an important book in that way, but it is, a very captivating story.
Yeah.
And a love story at that one, really.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it starts with, and I think we'll get back to this, like kind of its placement because what you were saying about turmoil of the judges, the bondage, it seems that they are to doing what's right in their own eyes. Then we have Ruth, and then we have the kingdom, or the king establishment of the kings. I see there's a progression there that we can talk about later on. But thinking about the beginning of this book, we see there's a famine in the land, and it talks about Elimelech and Naomi, two people from Bethlehem, from Judah. They dwell in the country. They leave that place because there is a famine in the land. So they're from Bethlehem, from the tribe of Judah. They went to dwell in the country of Moab, and they had 2 sons, and they went to this place to find resources, to find food, because they're in a land of famine. So they're going to this place that maybe they wouldn't go otherwise.
Exactly.
Because they don't have the provision for what they have or what they need from a food standpoint.
Yeah.
Right.
And they family. They got 2 boys.
Yep. They have 2 sons, Mahlon and Chilion. And also they are coming from Bethlehem and Judah and going to this place of Moab. And it says that they remained there. And while they're there, Naomi's husband Elimelech dies, and she's left with her 2 sons. Her 2 sons married to Moabite women, Orpah and Ruth, and they dwell there, it says, about 10 years. And then both of Naomi's sons pass away. So now it's Naomi, Orpah, and Ruth here. All of their husbands have passed away, and they are in Moab, a place where Naomi is not from, but where Orpah and Ruth are from. So it's an interesting start to the story where there's a famine. It seems like everything's still going wrong in this situation, continuation from Judges. There's a famine. They move. All the men die. And now these women are here, and they cry out in their suffering, it seems, thinking about what are we supposed to do? And I think that's a point or a thought when it says in verse 6 here, Naomi arose with her daughter-in-laws that she might return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. So they leave because of famine. They go through this turmoil of all their husbands dying, and now she hears that there is bread back in the land of Judah, back in Bethlehem where she came from.
Yep.
And now we have this progression. So I don't know if there's any thoughts to be had, but being brought, finding the resources or following in what the provision is for a time or for a season in our life, looking at this story, looking at, there's famine here. I need to go there, and being there and seeing, okay, I could be comfortable in that place, maybe. It doesn't say that Moab ran out of food. Like, it wasn't like there was a famine in Moab now. No. But they did go there, and all this bad stuff, their husbands all passed away. So now they're like, okay, what should we do now? Right? And
well, they lived in the land of promise. And this, when you say it's from Bethlehem, this is, immediately, this is really the setup of the Christmas story.
Yeah.
because David is of Bethlehem. And why would Mary and Joseph have to go to Bethlehem? Because they were of the line of David. So it looks like Moab was like maybe right across the water
Yeah.
from, is that the Dead Sea?
Yep.
The Dead Sea. So it looks like they could have just taken a very short boat trip maybe over there. It's, who said it? I think it's an old preacher. He said, don't sacrifice the permanent on the altar of the immediate. There was an immediate need for food. You're a husband. You got 2 boys. They need food.
Yep.
And that's just the decision they decided to make.
Yep.
Where they could have stayed in Judah and waited it out. They chose not to. And then, so very patriarchal society, men drove the culture.
Yes.
And so to be 3 women, a widow woman, or 3 widow women, we got 3 widow women probably. There's, lots of places in the Bible where, what does it mean to be truly spiritual? It's to care for the orphans and the widows.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing, and the needy. So these are now very needy people. And I'm not so sure, the value on women's lives was, it certainly wasn't in what it is in today's world. So, you get to this place here where 3 widows, and they hear again that there's bread in Judah. And I'm thinking, and when we go through the rest of the story, we know that Naomi just thinking she'll go back by herself. She's not expecting either of these women. I mean, so this is another thing, like these are, everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes. Even Elimelech is doing what's right in his own eyes. So let's get the connection from the previous book. So he thinks this is right. And they find girls that they like. And they marry them. They're Moabites, but you're not supposed to marry Moabites. And there's some prohibitions about Moabites, something. Now, Moab was one of the sons of Lot.
Yes.
Born to one of his daughters in that torturous, strange story in Genesis after the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
So, the sisters, 2 sisters, daughters of Lot, got their father drunk, slept with him, and got pregnant. And two nations, the Ammonites and the Moabites, came from that man, that incestuous relationship that he didn't know was happening. So anyway, but God is redeeming it here. But Moabites were not supposed to be a part of the congregation because there was another season when they did something that they didn't allow Israel to pass through their land or have anything from the land. I think that's what it was. So that again, but here we see several places, and you can look at it in the line of Jesus. Several places we see that Ruth is one of the women that's mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus, along with Rahab, who was the harlot, along with Bathsheba, who was she's not mentioned by name, but she's mentioned as being a part of the line of Jesus. So all the women in there have sort of all the way back to Tamar. Yeah. Tamar, who was the Judah himself slept with a woman he thought was a prostitute, but it was actually his daughter-in-law. Yeah. You can't make this stuff up. Yeah. The Bible has all these kind of twisted circumstances in it. And this story starts with the twisted circumstance. Elimelech did what was right in his own eyes. This is best for my family. And what's the outcome? Naomi is thinking, I'm going to leave my 2 widowed daughter-in-laws here, and I'm going to go back home to my people because I've heard that there's food there again. Again, it's food. Yeah. Why is she going? If there wasn't food there, would she stay here with? I don't know. Yeah.
And the funny I was looking up. So we have Bethlehem or Judah, but Bethlehem is specifically mentioned, and then we have Moab, which is these 2 places where they are going to and from, back and forth to. And I was just looking up the meaning of both of those. And Bethlehem means house of bread.
Okay.
And then Moab means who is your father.
Whoa.
So thinking of these 2 places, Bethlehem means house of bread. So there's no bread in the house of bread. I'm going to leave and go to this place where the authority or the father, the patriarchy or whatever it is, has a tortured past, a tortured origin, as we've already outlined. And now in the midst of that place, we have these two daughters of Moab, the Orpah and Naomi and Ruth, who are now given this choice of whether to continue in this place where they are looking where they're living in the lineage of this craziness that started it all off with Lot and his daughters, versus kind of making a choice that could maybe redeem their heritage and their lineage or their life. They've already experienced some disaster with their husbands passing away,
and their father-in-law
passing away, which in that time in history, the ancient Near East, there is like, if I am a widow, if I'm not married, that's bad. But if I'm a widow, that's maybe even worse. That now what worth do I have in any part of the world, in any part of my world, if I have no husband, or the husband that I had is now
well, it could have been very easy in the kind of, the polytheistic cultures and, the understanding of the supernatural and superstition. It could have been that all three of them thought themselves cursed.
Yeah.
Because we know that when, let's see, who was it? When Sarah finally got pregnant, she prayed that he's removed my reproach. Was that Sarah? Maybe it wasn't Sarah, but one woman who was barren became pregnant, and she praised the Lord because he is. Oh no, that's Elizabeth in the first chapter of Luke. Elizabeth was older and had not had a child, and she praised the Lord for being removed. So you've removed my reproach. So it could have been like the fact that they could have been like totally outcasts. Like could they have even gotten bread? We don't know. Maybe Naomi would have been, at least because she wasn't of Moab, she was a foreigner.
Yeah.
She could have been totally outcast at it all. Look at the curse that you brought us to, So
yeah, and I think so. They are now having a choice to make. Naomi gives them that choice she tells them to go back to their
she
families.
doesn't even want them to come to Israel with her.
And they have this conversation, verses 11 or verses 9 through 14, going back and forth. Why would you go with me? My sons are dead. If I were to marry somebody back in Judah, are you going to wait for them to be old enough to marry, to restore that, to have that marriage again, to be my daughters-in-law again? And then it says in verse 14, they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And that clinging to her, we see in the next few verses of what Ruth says to Naomi. It says, entreat me not to leave you or to turn back from following after you, for wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. And then when Naomi saw that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. So we have this interaction. Ruth makes a choice. She says, I'm not going to stay and live under this Moabite, this lineage that has this tortured past, or has this. I'm going to take this opportunity to adjust my circumstance, to follow Naomi back to this place where the house of bread, go somewhere where there is hope, maybe something different, something that can change, something that has shifted her perspective. Now she is clinging to Naomi and following her to this place. And I think that is something that can help us, and we can think about these things. Maybe we feel like we're chained to something, or it's our lot in life to live by whatever this thing is that's over our head, whether it's a family heritage, whether it's a mistake that we made in our past, whether it's a national type of thing where we are our nationality, or the place we grew up, our neighborhood, mistakes, successes, failures. We have this thing that we feel like we can't get out from underneath. And this Ruth is an example of choosing how you want your future to be.
Yeah.
She came from as we've mentioned, a place where the origin was not good, and she was known, and we see it in the later chapters of the scripture. She is known as the Moabite woman, the Moabite woman, the Moabite woman, over and over again in her interactions with the different people when she's back in Judah. But she doesn't let that. First of all, she doesn't let it limit her from going and doing that thing, because a lot of times we can be held back or hold ourselves back because we're like, well, I can't do that because I'm this.
Yes.
Whatever label we want to impose on ourselves, or whatever label someone else has imposed on us. Even the labels that the enemy gives, you can't do that because you're a liar, you're a thief, you're a stealer, you're a hypocrite, whatever the case is. And we can let that dictate what we're going to do and where we're going to go. But Ruth chose to not go back and live under whatever that banner was or that label was, but she said, I'm going to go with you, and have that choice to cling to that and not let that hinder her, but let it be something that she can embrace and run after as she's going after Naomi.
Yeah, this is a big moment in this story here, because it's kind of interesting here. Is like, I like to read this chapter and think about the early chapters and then the progression that goes through in Job, because we have people with bitter circumstances here. And we see that Job gets counsel, bad counsel, from 3 friends, but he keeps on talking to God. Here we see Naomi, she's not even talking to God. And the things that she's saying about the Lord, he's dealt bitterly with me. Why would you want to come with me? You know, she's developed this idea of bitterness. We know that there's this phrase in Job about holding fast to his integrity, which is really, you know, anything about math, integers, prime number.
Yeah.
He knew his primary identity. That's the way I look at it. Job would not forsake his primary identity as a man who loved God and served God and knew that God heard him. He was frustrated and he poured out all his complaints. He vented for dozens of chapters, a couple dozen chapters. But here we see Naomi isn't even talking to God. She's just saying, you don't want to come back with me. My God has dealt bitterly with me. And, you know, the primary Moabite god was a bull god named Chemosh, and the people sacrificed children to that god, bull god. You can see pictures of it, of course, on the internet. You can see anything nowadays. But, you know, it's a big golden bull god with a bunch of drummers around it, and people would offer children there for them. Child sacrifice was very common. So this is the god that Naomi was trying to send her daughter-in-law back to. And I'm thinking that we all know people maybe that were very instrumental in our lives as Christians, and then they stop believing. You know, you have friends from your age group that have stopped believing, and they may have been people that encouraged you in your faith, but then they fell off into following things that aren't true. Here we see, even though Naomi is expressing a God who treats her bitterly, Ruth was hanging on to something different. And she's saying, no, I do not want to go back to my people and to this God. I want to go with you to your people and to your God, and that's where I want to die. I want to spend the rest of my days that way. So it could be that anything can happen to anybody, you know, and some people can get spun out. And if do you go down into the ditch with someone who's decided to jump into the ditch and not follow the path of God? And here we see a good example, like Ruth refuses to believe. I learned something else, and I've treasured this in my heart. And what you told me about the people and about the God of your people is staying with me, and I'm going to stay with you, because this is what's staying. I'm not listening to you right now because I don't think you're speaking the truth right now. So that shows maybe amazing maturity and a level of spirituality that Naomi doesn't have right now.
Yeah.
But rather than ditch the woman who told her about God, the true God, Ruth is going to go with her, and she's purposing to be a companion and stay with someone who's out of order.
Yeah.
Have you ever had to do that? I don't know. Maybe you have had to do that. I don't.
I think like one thing that comes to mind is this idea of the negative outcome, like the negative circumstance that Ruth, Orpah, and Naomi find themselves in, the different responses they have to it based on the level of faith that they have, based on their worship.
Exactly.
Growing up for Naomi and Orpah, growing up in Moab with these other gods, little g gods that they are worshiping, that their people are worshiping, and they're seeing potentially, sacrifice, different types of sacrifices, different types of worship towards these gods. They are coming from a situation, maybe they have experienced the insufficiency or the inadequacy of those gods, and now they are in this negative, they have seen the impact of it negatively in their life where their husbands have passed away. And now it's like, okay, well, clearly these gods do not want what's best for me. So maybe this God that Naomi has been telling me about will be the outcome. And Orpah clearly doesn't have that same viewpoint, but Ruth does. Yeah. But Naomi in this situation, she is in this negative circumstance and is blaming the benevolent God, the God Yahweh that she has worshiped for this. And it's interesting how Ruth, who is maybe less familiar or knows less about the God of Israel, is the one who is encouraging Naomi in the worship or in pursuing the God of Israel, as opposed to Naomi, who seems to be like, just God doesn't care. Go back, go and do this. You don't have a husband. Go back to your people, your families, and just live the rest of your life in that way. What did you?
Let me ask you a question, though. Is it possible that, Ruth understands the character of God and the true nature of God, even though she doesn't have all the information about God that Naomi has? So,
yeah, I think so. I think that in some cases we can overcomplicate. We can complicate what our faith has to be in order to actually, for it to be true or valid or whatever we want to say. Like, I can believe the thief on the cross can believe in God more than the Pharisees who knew about God.
Good.
And there's many examples of that. And we can have those layers of information about God come between us and the actual person of God, as opposed to the thief or any other, centurion who said, I believe that you can do this. They didn't have those layers and maybe that's the case here with Ruth and Naomi, that I have a concept about God and it's actually preventing me from seeing him in the way that he is. But this person who has seen the other side, has seen the negative outcomes of doing what is right in my own eyes.
Yeah. Now
I can see, well, let me try and worship this God. And if I'm going to the place that's called the House of Bread, it's also the largest nation that is in the nation of Israel. It's the place where Caleb established himself. It's the place where there's a lot of history that maybe Ruth isn't privy to, being a Moabite, but Naomi likely knows all the things about this, and Ruth maybe has heard and learned, and we're speculating, obviously, but there is more to this than just, I'm following Naomi because I have nowhere else to go. I feel like Ruth has made a choice to have faith in something, and there is something that has sparked in her heart to follow after Naomi and to go back to Judah, to go back to Bethlehem. And I think just because somebody is young in their faith, or maybe doesn't know as much as another person knows, doesn't mean that they can't help have that relationship and encourage somebody who is more knowledgeable to have a fuller relationship with the Lord. Like, we can let the knowledge of God prevent us from having a relationship with him.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. I think A.W. Tozer said it pretty good. He said, sometimes the word dies in the hands of its friends. So Jesus was saying that with the scribes. You search the scriptures thinking that what's on the page, the letters on the page are what's life, but really there's something more. And then we see that Naomi had lots of information, lots of memories about being a servant of Yahweh, being in a country that exalts Yahweh. And Ruth had only a minimal amount, but she digested it. And this is what I want.
Yeah, and I think that when those negative things happen to us, that can push us away from, like thinking of Naomi being in the midst of these times in the Judges where they're being conquered, and then God raises somebody up.
Yeah,
and then
exactly.
all the ups and downs that come along with the book of Judges based on who the judge is and based on the circumstances and the nations and all the different things. As you mentioned, it's a book that is chaotic, to say the least. We can... What is my perspective and my thinking in the midst of those difficulties? Yeah. And we talked about it already. Am I making a decision that is for the immediate, or am I making a decision that is fundamental and foundational? And how do I navigate those different things? And I think going through difficult times is a reality of the world that we are in.
Yeah, for sure.
I think it's in Romans. I can't remember. It's in one of Paul's letters, talks about the fellowship of his sufferings, right? It's not always going to be the healings and the raising of the dead. It's maybe sometimes going to be me walking with him in his suffering and recognizing the suffering that Christ endured and having a hope in that, as opposed to thinking everything's going to be great and everything is bad because I am cursed by God, or whatever the case is. So I think that these negative things can help point us towards God, as opposed to pushing us away from God, if I am willing to consider that. Now, we can go through we go through difficult situations.
Yeah.
We go through times in our life, and it's not necessarily always our fault. We're looking for someone to blame.
Yeah.
We're looking for a reason or an explanation for why things are happening. We're in the midst, in our nation, we have, hundreds of people that are without power, people that have lost their lives because of flooding in Texas and New Mexico and North Carolina. And month after month and year after year, we have these different things, and we try to find an answer as to why, and maybe pursuing God and getting to know him more. It's not going to bring people back or not going to prevent those things from happening, but it is going to give us something that we can cling to, someone that we can cling to, that won't change and won't move.
Well, I think that's things. And when we talk about, God's word not returning void, it doesn't come back empty. That's another scripture I don't know the address to right now, but I know it's in the Bible somewhere.
Yeah.
But you can see, who was it saying? We're seed scatterers. Someone said it in one of a message. I think it was maybe Pastor Gary Grunwald or something about scattering seed.
Oh yeah, and he threw scattering the seeds all over the place.
Yeah, scattering seeds. So we scatter seed, and we think about that and it takes root in someone like Ruth here. And these is a story of two identities that are Ruth is transforming her identity according to what she's heard about the God Yahweh. Naomi, for a season here, is adopting an identity related to the circumstances.
Yeah.
She's bitter. She says, I'm bitter. And then we see that at the conclusion of the first chapter, she comes back to Bethlehem. People recognize her. Oh, isn't this Naomi, which means beautiful? And she said, no, don't call me that. I'm Mara. I'm a bitter person right now. Yeah. My husband died. My two sons died. And, I don't know. Did she say, all I got is Ruth? Did she say that? I don't think she said it, but people knew that Ruth was not of Israel, but she had come back with Naomi. And another thing is, when we look at church history, something happened, and something happened beginning with the humanist philosophies that sort of started to deconstruct the pagan idols and the pagan deities that were worshipped in the Greek and the Roman empires. We know that the humanistic philosophy, reason, and this kind of thing, this was also starting to like chip away at this. But when Christianity came, and here was this a different kind of, first it was Judaism. This was a kind of God that could be known. Mm-hmm. And then when Christianity came, this was a God who can be known, and a God who came and lived among us, and a God who rose again. Mm-hmm. It destroyed paganism as far as we know it. You can see historians say, like, after, in the 300s into the 400s and 500s, paganism, part of the reason was that the Roman emperors became, exalted Christianity as the official religion, so to speak. And that caused problems for Christianity. But take my, come to Maryland Bible College in the fall and take my church history class. You'll find all about it, because it's the first couple hundred years. That'll be the first couple weeks of that class. But, I'm thinking Ruth recognized that the God Yahweh could be known, and she wanted that. Yeah. And just as these people in the cities of Rome, when there are a lot of gods, everyone was kind of interested in, this is just the new God. Oh, this is a different kind of God. Mm-hmm. This is a different God. This is not a God that you add to all your other gods. This is a God that you get rid of everything else and you just worship him, because he is a king of another kind of kingdom. And so this sort of logically answers, until people find the true king, they will always wind up doing what is right in their own eyes. Yeah. Correct?
Yeah, and I think in some ways, doing what is right in their own eyes is an idol, is a God.
It is an idol. It's a different kind of.
And now, maybe paganism and these specific gods that have different names from the time Christianity began, maybe now we have these gods that have different names, but we don't call them gods. We call them, they're still idols. And it's interesting to think about God in the Israelites going into these nations and worshiping the first two commandments: you shall have no gods before me, right? You shall not create an idol. Thinking about that is something that was prevalent in that time in all the nations, and knowing the Israelites coming out of Egypt and the mixed multitude that existed within them, like God was aware of these different idols, these different pagan methods of worship that existed in this time, and he was preparing them to worship him in a way that you don't worship these other gods. Mm-hmm. You worship me. I am the one true God, Yahweh. Yeah. There are these other gods that you know of, that maybe your families worship, that the people you come in contact with will worship. And now in our world, let's just call it, we have these gods in our life. We have our careers that are gods. Yeah. We have money that can be a god. We have our homes, which can be a god. Our nationality, which can be a god. Our family heritage, which can be a god. Our athletic team, which can be a god.
Hey. Yeah, that's true.
I'm calling out. No,
it's all right.
And I've felt this in my own, my own life. When my week ebbs and flows based on whether the Ravens win or lose, that is a God I'm worshiping in my life that is not meant to be worshiped in that way. Yeah. And God is meant to be in a place of preeminence and honor, and a place set apart from all these other things that I worship. And I think Ruth maybe was brought to a place where she could only recognize this God, because she had nothing else that she could say, I could worship. Maybe I worship this God, whatever it was, Chemosh from Moab, and he failed, so I have no other choice. And we have maybe these other gods that we could worship in some way, but God is meant to be worshipped above all those things. Yeah, I'm not advocating that we not enjoy these other aspects of them, but not worship them as if they are God in our life. And I think Naomi and Ruth coming back into Bethlehem, their reception, it says that the people are excited
to see Naomi,
to see them.
Yeah, so she might have been a popular person.
And I think she is so focused on the negative things, that it says that in verse 21, I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home again empty.
Yeah. And
Right?
here's
She
Ruth.
wasn't full.
Yeah.
She wasn't. It was a famine when they left. But she like has like this whole thing has been, oh, well, it was great. Everything was all great. And then we left and did this thing. And now God's judging me. And now I'm coming back to a place where there is bread and there is food and I can come back and people are excited to see me, but I don't want to hear the excitement. I want to sit in my bitterness because God has judged me. And that's, I think, a real thing for people as well, where I have trusted you, Lord, and my circumstances aren't matching up with my dedication and my faith in you. And
Wow.
how do we reconcile that? How do we understand that? And I think as we go through the book of Ruth, we'll see how Naomi has this maybe shift back to recognizing God's providence and God's sovereignty.
Well, it's true. I mean, we're not going to give up the, well, I mean, a lot of people probably heard this story. Spoiler alert, the story does get better. It has a happy ending.
Yes.
And part of the happy ending is that Naomi begins to connect with the reality of who God is and the way that God has constructed his nation. And just the whole idea of her family member Boaz and how Ruth marries into Boaz. And, and I think, we got to recognize like Ruth it says it happened 10 years. So she's not like a teen queen. Yeah. I mean, Ruth has been married and, she's, she gets connected to Boaz because of, Naomi starts to think according to the law of God. And this is really important. And she's not thinking, she's not looking at what's right in her own eyes anymore. Yeah. She gets to that point later in the story. But, the thing is I always get, I came back empty and I'm like thinking, this is another moment for Ruth. Like she just said that she came back with nothing and you came back with her. Like this is a point, another
Ruth's like,
challenge point.
Thanks,
like,
Naomi.
I'm get on the boat and go back home to Moab. Exactly. Forget,
she stops talking to her.
That's right.
And then she says she came back with nothing.
You did talk to me the whole way across the water, and now you say I'm nothing. Yeah. Okay.
Talk about confidence and like your identity.
Love one another. Yeah. So anyway, but I think that's so again, this is like the choices that's what this book exists for is. And again, what the other thing to sort of conclude here is it says that God raised up Israel to be a light to the nations. And we know that Israel got scattered because she wasn't properly the light to the nations. And we see that at different points, whether it's Judah, having sex with Tamar, who's the daughter of a Hittite or something like that back there. God is bringing that people group in, the Moabites, that people group's brought in, whatever Canaanite tribe or people group that Rahab was from, God brought that people group in. And it's like, this is the thing. When the temple of God was finally dedicated by Solomon, he prayed an amazing prayer. If any stranger not of your people would pray towards this place, hear him. Or her. So it is like, this has been like the missionary idea. And like you said it earlier in the show that wherever Israel was scattered, the people still worship the Lord and the peoples watch them worship the Lord. And so this is another thing. God went and got a Moabitess and taught Naomi faith. And that Moabitess's reward for her faith was that she's a part of the Messiah.
Yeah. And I think that's really incredible to think that somebody that goes through a difficult situation, someone who maybe has been brought up or experienced turmoil and difficulty can be a mechanism for God to kind of restore this thing and be a huge part of the lineage, a huge part of the story, not just in terms of name or the things that happened to her, but like in the lineage for generations to see that, because it is something that can be questioned. Like, how does God take care of these marginalized or abused, or these different people. Like God is utilizing them. God is working evil for good in these situations. God demonstrates that in these ways. And one last thing before we wrap up, like the thing we were talking about at the very beginning, the Judges, Ruth and Samuel, thinking about this in the midst of that, like the wandering, the Israelites going from being tortured and enslaved and in bondage. We see this light of Ruth in the midst of that, and then going into the progression for the kingdom of God. I just see a comparison in one way of like the nation of Israel leaving Egypt in the midst of the wilderness. Moses has this encounter with the Lord. Moses, like God gives his command, God demonstrates his presence in the midst of his people. And then we see the kingship, the royalty that comes after this interaction with Ruth. So I think there are these themes, there are these threads that we see in the Bible of I'm in bondage. I have an identity. I have this thing that's been imposed on me, this idea, this thought, this reference, this name that I am delivered from by this interaction with the Almighty, where heaven and earth meet. And then there is this place of promise where I will go, where God will rule and reign. And I think this is the middle of that progression, where Ruth has this method or this way that she is encountering the Lord and clinging to that. Maybe the same way that Jacob was clinging to the Lord when he was wrestling with him. Maybe in the same way that Moses, when he was saying, show me your glory, Ruth is looking for Naomi to lead her to this place where she can experience God in the fullest way.
It's amazing. So that's good.
Amen.
Naomi needed someone to help her unbelief, and God gave her Ruth. So that's amazing. Yep.
Amen. Well, thanks for joining us on the Grace Hour Show today. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the other places. And be sure to check out the rest of the episodes this week as we continue in the book of Ruth.